bombing Iran right now.
Were those reports just as of a few minutes ago?
Yeah.
Okay, so obviously I'll have to go back and check with the national security team. I'm standing out here with all of you, but I will do that and we will get you an answer, okay?
And just on the civilization.
Who is bombing Iran right now? That question, asked live at the White House podium during a press briefing that opened with a victory lap, is the moment this entire briefing collapsed. The press secretary had just spent nearly 20 minutes telling the world that Operation Epic Fury was a historic military triumph. Total air dominance. Iran's navy annihilated. 13,000 targets struck. The regime on its knees. The Strait of Hormuz reopening. A 2-week ceasefire. Peace on the horizon. And then a reporter said, there are explosions being reported inside Iran right now. Air defenses are activating. Multiple cities, and the White House press secretary, the spokesperson for the most powerful military on earth, said, I'll have to go back and check. Not a briefing about a minor policy disagreement. Not a question about a budget line. A question about active military strikes during a ceasefire that had been announced less than 24 hours earlier. And the answer was, I don't know. I'll check. That exchange tells you everything you need to know about the gap between what was announced at this briefing and what was actually happening in the world while it was being announced. Let's go back to the beginning. Because the setup, the opening statement, was extraordinary, and it needs to be heard before we get to how it unraveled.
With respect to the 2-week ceasefire announced by President Trump last night, this is a victory for the United States of America that the president and our incredible military made happen. From the very beginning of Operation Epic Fury, President Trump stated this would be a 4 to 6 week military operation to dismantle the military threat posed by the radical Islamic Iranian regime. Thanks to the unbelievable capabilities of America's war fighters, the United States has achieved and exceeded those core military objectives in just 38 days. The U.S. military destroyed Iran's defense industrial base, crushing the regime's ability to manufacture weapons that they and their proxies use to maim and kill Americans and terrorize the world. Iran's ability to build and stockpile ballistic missiles and long-range drones has also been set back by years compared to where it was 6 weeks ago prior to the launch of Operation Epic Fury. We destroyed the vast majority of Iran's ballistic missiles, launcher vehicles, and long-range attack drones through more than 450 strikes on ballistic missiles and approximately 800 strikes on Iran's drone launching units and storage facilities. In total, more than 13,000 targets across Iran were struck. Again, this is in the matter of just 38 days. Meanwhile, the Iranian Navy was completely annihilated. The United States destroyed more than 150 naval vessels in total, including 16 entire classes of Iranian warships. Despite once being the largest undersea force in the Middle East, Iran now has 0 submarine vessels. 97% of Iran's once massive inventory of more than 5,000 naval mines has also been targeted and destroyed. Iran's air forces are functionally and operationally irrelevant at this point, after the United States maintained total air dominance over their country for weeks on end. To underscore the significance of this, before Operation Epic Fury, the Iranian Air Force would fly between 30 to 100 flights per day. Today, that number is 0. Iran's ability to fund and support its terrorist proxies has been greatly reduced. At this point, Iran can no longer distribute weapons to its proxies in the region. And most importantly, Iran will not be able to acquire nuclear weapons. Prior to the start of this successful operation, Iran was aggressively expanding its short-range ballistic missile arsenal. Through these weapons and its navy, Iran was attempting to build a military buildup around their country that would pose an imminent and existential threat to the United States military assets in the Middle East, our allies in the region, and ultimately the free world. Iran was pursuing this dangerous and aggressive strategy for one reason: to hold the entire world hostage to its terrorist ambitions. The Iranians aim to use their expanded military capabilities as a shield around their country to continue achieving their ultimate goal internally, building nuclear bombs. But their murderous and evil plans have been blown up, quite literally and figuratively, along with their military, their nuclear program, and most of their senior leadership, including the former Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Their command and control structures were also massively disrupted after being struck more than 2,000 times. Many of their remaining leaders are paralyzed in fear and no longer enjoy the freedom to move around their country freely and meet openly. Thanks to the unmatched excellence of our warriors at the direction of the Commander-in-Chief, the world has just witnessed a historically swift and successful military triumph. President Trump started Operation Epic Fury with strategic military objectives, and the United States has clearly achieved them. As we mark this progress, we also remember and honor the 13 American heroes who laid down their lives in this noble effort. I know President Trump and our grateful nation honors their ultimate sacrifice, and we will never forget them. May God bless their families. The valiant efforts of all of our incredible service members created maximum leverage for the President of the United States, allowing he and his leadership team to engage in tough negotiations over the past couple of weeks that have now created an opening for a diplomatic solution and long-term peace in the Middle East. The President's maximum pressure and the leverage created by the success of Operation Epic Fury led to the Iranian regime asking for and ultimately agreeing to a ceasefire proposal with the United States. Iran could no longer tolerate being bombed or taking the gamble of what was to come following President Trump's 8 p.m. deadline last night. Iran has agreed to open the Strait of Hormuz, and as the President said, we have received a proposal from the Iranians that has been determined to be a workable basis on which to negotiate. I've seen a lot of inaccurate coverage today from the media about these negotiations and these plans already. So let me be clear and correct the record. The Iranians originally put forward a 10-point plan that was fundamentally unserious, unacceptable, and completely discarded. It was literally thrown in the garbage by President Trump and his negotiating team. Many outlets in this room have falsely reported on that plan as being acceptable to the United States, and that is false. With the President's deadline fast approaching and the United States military completely decimating Iran with each passing hour, the regime acknowledged reality to the negotiating team. They put forward a more reasonable and entirely different and condensed plan to the President and his team. President Trump and the team determined the new modified plan was a workable basis on which to negotiate and to align it with our own 15-point proposal. The President's red lines, namely the end of Iranian enrichment in Iran, have not changed. And the idea that President Trump would ever accept an Iranian wish list as a deal is completely absurd. The President will only make a deal that serves in the best interests of the United States of America, and he as a negotiating team will focus on this effort over the next 2 weeks, so long as the Strait of Hormuz remains open with no limitations or delays. These extraordinarily sensitive and complex negotiations will take place behind closed doors over the course of the next 2 weeks. I would strongly advise the media against running with narratives that have no basis in fact. What Iran says publicly or feeds to all of you in the press is much different than what they communicate to the United States, the President, and his team privately.
Let's go through what just happened, point by point. The opening statement declared Iran's military functionally and operationally irrelevant. Iran now has 0 submarines, 13,000 targets struck, the Navy annihilated, nuclear program destroyed, regime leadership dead or paralyzed. That is the official White House record of what Operation Epic Fury accomplished in 38 days. And then, before the briefing even finished, a reporter said Iran just closed the Strait of Hormuz again. Levitt's response, what they say publicly is different from what they communicate privately. This is the answer. For everything. The strait is closed publicly, but privately it's opening. Iran is saying one thing to the world, but privately they're telling the White House something different. Trust us. Don't trust Iranian state media. Trust what they tell us behind closed doors. This is now the framework the administration is asking the American public to accept. Ignore what you see, ignore what's reported, ignore what Iran says publicly, and trust what the White House tells you they said in secret. And this wasn't a one-time deflection. It was deployed multiple times. The Strait closing? Different privately. The explosions? Haven't seen those reports. The civilizational threat? That's what led to results. NATO saying they were abandoned, they were tested, and they failed. Every challenge to the narrative received the same answer. Trust the private version. The public reality is not the real reality. Only what we tell you happened. Now the threat to destroy Iranian civilization. A reporter asked directly George W. Bush, when invading Iraq, specifically said the war was against the government, not the people. Trump threatened to destroy the entire civilization. The people, not the regime. Why is that acceptable? Levitt's answer, it led to results. That's it. The justification for threatening to destroy a civilization is that it worked. Moral framing, the kind the United States has built its international identity on for decades, is apparently optional if the results come through. And when asked whether the nuclear war doctrine, a nuclear war cannot be won and must never be fought, still applies under this administration, Levitt said, I have no change in our view on that policy. But she had just finished saying the civilization threat was not an empty threat. The Pentagon had a target list ready. They were prepared to hit go at 8 p.m. if Iran didn't comply. Those two things cannot both be true. Either the civilizational threat was genuine, in which case the doctrine has changed, or it was a bluff. And if it was a bluff, then the moral high ground the administration is claiming rests on a threat they didn't mean. There was no answer that squared this circle, because there isn't one. And then there's NATO. European allies issued a joint statement supporting freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz and offered to contribute. A gesture of support. Levitt's response, citing the president directly, they were tested and they failed. America's NATO allies offering to help secure the outcome America just claimed as a historic victory, and the White House's response is that they failed a test, while simultaneously the administration is sending Jared Kushner to lead peace negotiations in Islamabad. Jared Kushner. The same Jared Kushner who, as Senator Ossoff stated at a Georgia rally this week, has already received $2 billion from Saudi Arabia, who, according to reporting, has been soliciting additional billions from Gulf kingdoms. And he is now the face of American diplomacy in the most strategically sensitive region on Earth, negotiating a nuclear deal with what remains of the Iranian regime. NATO failed, but Jared's in. And then, this moment. An Iranian-American reporter at the briefing said, one of my family members said goodbye to me yesterday. She asked what message Iranians should receive. How should they stay safe? Levitt's answer, the president took out the military threat posed by Iran. He hopes Iran will be a country of peace. We're moving into negotiations. The reporter followed up. You said they should stay in their homes and take back their country. Isn't that a contradiction? It is. And there was no answer. Here is what the White House said at this briefing. Operation Epic Fury was a total, historic, unambiguous military victory. Iran's military is gone. The Strait is reopening. Peace negotiations are beginning. America has the moral high ground. Here's what happened during the briefing. Iran closed the Strait again. Explosions were reported inside Iran during the ceasefire. The press secretary didn't know who was bombing Iran. NATO allies said they had been abandoned. And every contradiction was answered with a variation of, what you see publicly is not the real story. The administration is asking you to ignore the publicly verifiable reality and accept a private narrative you cannot check, verify, or challenge. That has a name. It's not a victory speech. It's a briefing where the ground shifted in real time and the podium didn't move an inch. If you followed this briefing to the end, you already know the questions reporters asked matter. The follow-ups matter. Subscribe. We break down every briefing, every hearing, every moment. The official story and the actual story diverge. Drop in the comments which moment from this briefing do you think deserves the most scrutiny. We'll build the deeper dive from your responses.